Hello, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. I wish you a pleasant listening experience. Today, I'm going to interpret the book Emotional First Aid for you. The subtitle is Healing Rejection, Guilt, Failure, and Other Everyday Hurts. In our daily lives, it's hard to avoid encountering some unpleasant situations, such as breaking up with a girlfriend, receiving criticism from a boss, or unintentionally hurting a good friend. These situations can affect our emotions to some extent, causing feelings of frustration, guilt, and unhappiness. While these emotions may not be severe enough to warrant seeing a psychologist, they can still be quite distressing. During such times, we need some methods to regulate our emotions, much like how everyone has a medicine cabinet at home to deal with minor injuries or colds. The book I'm discussing today serves as a psychological medicine cabinet, providing simple solutions to everyday emotional problems. The author of this book is Guy Winch, Ph.D., a clinical psychologist with a doctorate from New York University. He is a member of the American Psychological Association and an expert in stress reduction. Since 1992, he has worked as a private practitioner in Manhattan, helping numerous patients overcome emotional difficulties. Next, I will provide a detailed explanation of specific strategies to address 6 emotional problems: feelings of rejection, loneliness, loss, guilt, failure, and inadequacy. The first emotional problem is the feeling of rejection, which is one of the most common emotional wounds. Rejection, whether it's being turned down for a job, rejected by someone you have feelings for, not receiving an invitation to a friend's gathering, or being rebuffed when trying to connect with someone, can cause emotional distress. Rejection can result in 3 types of harm. 1. Emotional pain, which is quite understandable. Even a simple rejection, like a friend declining your dinner invitation, can make you feel uncomfortable. 2. It can trigger aggressive behavior. Mild forms of aggression might involve punching walls or kicking doors, while more severe forms can endanger lives. For instance, a rejected lover seeking revenge or a dismissed employee lashing out at their boss. 3. Rejection can also damage our self-esteem. When we are rejected, we tend to blame ourselves, thinking we must have done something wrong in social interactions. This can lead to a decrease in self-esteem. So, how can we deal with the psychological damage caused by rejection? The author provides 4 solutions. 1. Engage in self-compassion. When faced with rejection, instead of harshly criticizing yourself, engage in self-compassion. For example, if someone rejects your romantic advances, don't immediately assume it's because you're not attractive enough. Instead, try to convince yourself that it might be because the person has different preferences or hasn't fully healed from a previous relationship. It's crucial to believe them if they say it's not your fault, even if they don't explicitly state it. Adding self-blame to rejection only deepens the emotional wounds. 2. Restore self-worth. To mitigate the damage of rejection, it's essential to remind yourself of your positive qualities. For example, if you've been rejected in a dating context, focus on your admirable traits, like kindness, loyalty, or charm. Create short essays explaining why these traits are significant to you and how they impact your life. This exercise helps you gain a deeper understanding of your strengths and boosts self-esteem. 3. Mend social connections. Sometimes, when we experience rejection from one group, we can find solace and support in another. It's not always the closest people who understand us best. Those who have faced similar experiences might offer more empathy. So, seek out communities or individuals who can relate to your situation. 4. Desensitize yourself. To overcome the fear of rejection, gradually expose yourself to situations where rejection is possible. For instance, if you're afraid of dating, try going on multiple dates in a short period. High-density social interaction can help reduce the fear of rejection over time. These are the 4 concrete methods to address the feeling of rejection. They include engaging in self-compassion, restoring self-worth, mending social connections, and desensitizing yourself to rejection. Next, let's delve into the second emotional issue, loneliness. Loneliness can be considered a modern affliction, particularly as the internet becomes increasingly prevalent. With the rise of technology, more and more people experience feelings of loneliness. According to the 2010 United States Census, approximately 27% of households in the United States consist of only one person. Loneliness not only diminishes our energy but also leads to problems such as reduced concentration and weakened judgment. Furthermore, it can harm our physical health by contributing to conditions like high blood pressure, obesity, increased cholesterol, and a weakened immune system. A study even found that among initially healthy college students, those who felt lonely had a weaker resistance to the flu compared to their non-lonely counterparts. When you're experiencing loneliness, you can try the following 3 methods. The first method is to connect with others. In other words, avoid isolating yourself and engage in interactive activities whenever possible. Open your contact list, quickly jot down a list of friends you have in mind, and note the last time you met with them and the details of your interactions. Then, based on your feelings, rate these individuals. The higher the rating, the more likely you should proactively reach out to them. A simple text message asking, "How have you been lately?" or even a brief conversation about each other's recent experiences can help alleviate loneliness. If possible, try to arrange meetings with them once or twice a week. You can also explore online platforms to find social activities that interest you, such as book clubs, hiking groups, or cycling teams. Actively participating in enjoyable social activities can certainly help alleviate loneliness. The second method is to identify self-sabotaging behaviors. Many people tend to feel lonely because they exhibit behaviors that lead to evident setbacks in their social interactions. For example, being quick to distrust others. The author shares the story of a friend named Toby who was laid off from his job just before Christmas. Toby felt devastated because his co-workers hadn't invited him to their private Christmas gathering, even though he had been invited in previous years. Toby assumed that he had been laid off because his colleagues looked down on him and that their previously established camaraderie had dissolved. However, the reality was that Toby's co-workers had sent him an invitation, but it had accidentally ended up in his spam folder. Similar situations occur frequently in life. Sometimes, a friend appears indifferent or unresponsive, leading us to believe that something is wrong with our relationship when, in fact, they might be upset about their favorite sports team losing. Aside from being quick to distrust others, various behaviors in social interactions can result in feelings of self-defeat, such as frequently interrupting others, always insisting on having things your way, or habitually abandoning your willpower in favor of others. If you can identify these behaviors and work to correct them, it can greatly benefit you in building better social relationships and reducing loneliness. The third method is to actively seek passive companionship. If you're unable to find opportunities to connect with others, consider seeking passive companionship. This means engaging in your own activities with someone else present who doesn't necessarily interact with or intervene in what you're doing. Cafes are excellent places for this. Even if you're alone, having others around who are engrossed in their own tasks can reduce the feeling of loneliness. Additionally, adopting a pet can also provide passive companionship. Animals have a remarkable therapeutic effect on human loneliness. An intriguing study divided participants into 2 groups. One group had lonely individuals spend time alone with a dog, while the other group had lonely individuals spend time with both a dog and another person. Surprisingly, those who spent time alone with the dog reported feeling less lonely. So, when you're feeling lonely and can't find suitable company, consider getting a cat or a dog. These are the 3 ways to alleviate loneliness: connecting with others, identifying self-sabotaging behaviors, and actively seeking passive companionship. Alright, we've discussed the feeling of loneliness. Now, let's move on to the third emotional issue, the sense of loss. The sense of loss is an inevitable part of life. It can manifest through various experiences like unemployment, parting with close friends, divorce, or the loss of loved ones, which are the most common forms of loss. Some losses challenge our self-identity, requiring us to redefine ourselves and adjust our roles, while others can deeply impact our values. For instance, the families who lost loved ones in the 9/11 attacks struggled to comprehend why their family members had to endure such a fate. Regarding the emotional damage caused by loss, the author presents 2 solutions. The first is to alleviate pain in your own way. After experiencing a loss, there are differing views among psychologists on how to cope with the pain. Some suggest expressing all emotions as openly as possible, believing that this release is essential for processing grief. On the other hand, some psychologists argue that immediately after a loss, people often find themselves in a state of deep sorrow, not wanting to see anyone or discuss anything. In such cases, it's crucial to respect their choice not to talk. Whether to speak or not, the author believes, depends on the individual's state. If they want to talk, let them express all their grief freely. If they prefer not to speak and want to spend time in their sorrow, that's okay too. In practice, the most helpful approach often depends on the individual's condition. The second method is to seek a new meaning for the loss, drawing inspiration from Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, an approach that focuses on helping individuals find meaning in their lives. Specifically, it involves finding meaning in the loss itself. While this may sound abstract and challenging, it's a concept we often apply in our daily lives. For example, when you lose your wallet, you might tell yourself it's a blessing in disguise, or when your phone breaks, you might console yourself with the thought that this creates an opportunity for a new one. However, when the loss involves a loved one or a friend, finding meaning becomes more complex. Frankl had an elderly patient who had lost his beloved wife 2 years earlier and was suffering greatly. Frankl asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first, and your wife were still alive?" The patient replied, "Oh, that would have been terrible for her. She would have suffered greatly." Frankl then told him, "You see, by dying first, you spared her from that suffering." In this example, Frankl successfully helped the patient find meaning in the loss. His own death spared his wife from suffering. When faced with significant losses that seem unbearable, it's worth trying to find meaning, as it can bring comfort. So, the two methods to alleviate the sense of loss are finding your own way to ease emotional pain and seeking a new meaning in the loss itself. Next, we'll discuss the fourth emotional issue, guilt. Guilt is one of the most common negative emotions people encounter in their daily lives. It can arise from inadvertently saying the wrong thing, failing to fulfill promises, or making choices like leaving your child with a babysitter due to work commitments. Guilt is estimated to occupy approximately 2 hours of a person's day in mild forms and about 3.5 hours per month in severe forms. Some intense feelings of guilt can persist for years. Once guilt arises, it indicates that something was not done well, and if not resolved promptly, it can harm interpersonal relationships and keep you in a self-reproachful emotional state. To address feelings of guilt, the author offers two methods. The first method is a sincere apology. You might think, who doesn't know how to apologize? However, a meaningful apology goes beyond mere words. When apologizing, it's crucial to acknowledge the other person's feelings. For instance, if you had a disagreement with a friend at a party and ruined the event, you should start by saying, "I know you put a lot of effort into this gathering, and I feel terrible for ruining it. You must be really upset." Acknowledging their feelings provides an outlet for the other person to express their frustration and anger. Additionally, your apology should be specific and heartfelt. Lastly, actions speak louder than words, so make sure to follow up your apology with actions to compensate for your mistake. For example, in the case of the ruined party, offering to organize another event to make amends would be a powerful way to apologize effectively. The second method for dealing with guilt is self-forgiveness. Even after a sincere apology, there's a possibility that the other person may not accept it or that the damage cannot be fully repaired. In such cases, you should learn to forgive yourself rather than dwelling in perpetual guilt. Self-forgiveness isn't about accepting everything you've done without remorse, it's a reflective process. The first step is accountability, where you objectively describe the harm you caused to others. During this step, it's essential to be honest with yourself and avoid glossing over the negative impact of your actions. Consider both the factual and emotional aspects of the harm, such as the economic hardship, time and energy required to rectify the situation, and the emotional toll on the other person. After objectively assessing the situation, you can identify factors that might mitigate your guilt, such as high levels of work-related stress or misguided advice. Reflecting on these mitigating factors allows you to understand the context of your actions and make necessary adjustments to avoid repeating similar mistakes. The second step in self-forgiveness is atonement, which usually involves two strategies. First, adjusting your behavior to minimize the likelihood of repeating the same mistake. Second, making meaningful amends for your actions. For example, if you're feeling guilty because you rarely attend your child's school events due to work commitments, you might reconsider your work-life balance and allocate more time to spend with your child. Additionally, you could plan a special outing or event to show your child that you value their time together. After the atonement process, consider holding a small ceremony or ritual to symbolize letting go of guilt and moving forward. These are the two methods for addressing feelings of guilt, offering a sincere apology and practicing self-forgiveness, which involves accountability and atonement. That we've covered the fifth emotional issue, which is the feeling of failure. Everyone experiences both minor and major failures in life. Even though we often say that failure is the mother of success, it can still be very distressing when we actually fail. Sometimes, it can even lead to a loss of self-confidence. Emotionally, failure is like catching a cold. While the experience of a cold isn't pleasant, with plenty of rest and warm fluids, we eventually recover. However, if we completely ignore a cold, the situation can worsen, and in severe cases, it might develop into pneumonia. Emotionally, the same principle applies. If we fail to take care of our mental health after experiencing failure, it can result in emotional wounds that are more damaging than the failure itself. Failure can lead us to underestimate our abilities, erode our self-esteem and confidence, and make us feel dejected. It can also trigger unconscious stress and fear, leading to significant anxiety. To address the emotional damage caused by failure, you can try the following two methods. The first method is to focus on factors you can control. When you feel like you can't do anything right because of failure, take a moment to analyze the reasons for your failure. Identify the factors within your control. For example, if you've failed your driving test multiple times, list the reasons that contributed to your failures, such as insufficient practice time, recent health issues, poor sense of direction, or a mismatch with your instructor. Among these factors, practice time and the choice of instructor are relatively controllable. You can increase your practice time, request a different instructor, or even find a private tutor. As for factors beyond your control, you can change your perspective. For instance, if you have a poor sense of direction, consider it as an opportunity for improvement through training. If your recent health issues were a hindrance, shift your focus to self-care to prevent future illnesses. Through this specific analysis, you'll realize that what initially seemed like a severe failure becomes more manageable when you identify factors you can control. The second method for dealing with the emotional impact of failure is to bravely acknowledge your failure and admit your anxiety and fear. When people fail, they often instinctively want to avoid it, refusing to admit that they've failed. However, this avoidance can lead to more severe consequences in other aspects of life. For instance, some individuals, after failing, find it challenging to release their emotional tension and may resort to arguments with others or venting their frustration on family members. Admitting failure and discussing your feelings with supportive people is the most effective way to cope. When you share your fears and anxieties, you allow yourself to process the emotions. Of course, if you can't find someone suitable to talk to, writing your fears and anxieties in a journal can also be a valuable method. These are the two methods for addressing the feeling of failure, focusing on controllable factors and bravely acknowledging and discussing your failure and emotions. Lastly, let's look at the sixth emotional issue, a sense of inferiority. Inferiority refers to an emotional experience that arises when comparing oneself to others and underestimating one's own worth. People who feel inferior often have a weakened emotional immune system, making them more susceptible to the emotional impact of failures or rejections. They tend to be more pessimistic and unhappy. The primary method for overcoming a sense of inferiority is to enhance self-esteem and self-confidence. Here, I'll introduce two methods to help you overcome feelings of inferiority. The first method is self-compassion. Self-compassion involves suppressing the inner voice of self-criticism and learning to show empathy and forgiveness to yourself. People who feel inferior often have a habit of self-criticism, frequently telling themselves they are stupid, inept, or incapable when things go wrong. These self-critical thoughts can further deepen their feelings of inferiority. To counteract this, practice self-compassion and stop self-criticism. When you catch yourself wanting to criticize, try to adopt a third-person perspective and imagine how you would comfort a friend in a similar situation. Write a letter to this imaginary friend expressing empathy, understanding their feelings, and reminding them that their experiences are worthy of sympathy and support. The main purpose of this exercise is to encourage individuals with a sense of inferiority to adopt a different way of thinking. People with a sense of inferiority often apply a double standard to themselves, being overly critical of themselves while being overly forgiving of others. Through this exercise, they will put in the effort to comfort others, but in reality, they are comforting themselves. The second method for overcoming a sense of inferiority is to build personal strength. To do this, focus on displaying self-confidence in one area of your life and then transfer that confidence to other areas. Start with small and simple tasks rather than challenging yourself with complex ones. Confidence accumulates quickly, even from small achievements, significantly boosting self-esteem. For example, if you fear public speaking, rather than aiming to give an outstanding speech right away, set simpler goals like successfully telling an interesting story to friends or creating a presentation. You can even find confidence in unrelated areas. For instance, if you excel at singing, spending a few hours at a karaoke bar can boost your self-confidence, which can then be transferred to your public speaking endeavors. So, there you have it, the two methods for overcoming a sense of inferiority are self-compassion and building personal strength. That concludes the content of this book on emotional first aid, covering feelings of rejection, loneliness, loss, guilt, failure, and inferiority, specific solutions for 6 emotional issues. A final reminder, the solutions discussed here are suitable for mild emotional problems. If you believe your emotional issues are severe and beyond self-help, please remember to seek assistance from a professional psychologist. With that said, we've now reached the end of our discussion on emotional first aid. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you all for tuning in to the Tim Booker channel. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, give it a thumbs up, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom and practicality to achieve our financial goals and create a better future together. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.